Hi, everyone. Exotic sounds? You bet. Tree toads. You don't hear many of them in Canada. Tonight we're going to take you on a trip to the Dominion of Jamaica to go fishing and rafting down the river Rio Grande. You'll hear more about this in just a few seconds. Once again, my name is Ted Peck, and a very pleasant welcome to Tides and Trails.
Tides and Trails is presented each week at this time by new Sportsman King Size Filter Cigarettes. Now here's Ted Peck.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, just a few short weeks ago, through the courtesy of the British Overseas Airways Corporation, the BOAC, we were able to visit the Dominion of Jamaica and do some fishing and some shooting down there as well. It's a wonderful country. It is a full-fledged Dominion of the Commonwealth, just as Canada is, and I think you're really going to enjoy the scenes of the rafting on the river. Now you have a look at the map of the Dominion of Jamaica, and you see three cities there: Montego Bay on the top left, and you see Kingston on the bottom right there, and Port Antonio, which is on the northwest coast of Jamaica. And Port Antonio is where these films on the rafting down the beautiful river Rio Grande take place. It's a sport unto itself, and those of you who are ever fortunate enough to visit the Dominion of Jamaica must take this rafting trip down the river and go fishing as well. Now we're going to show you something of Kingston and, of course, the other cities as well. Here is the BOAC Flight 537, which took us to Montego Bay and to Kingston. And I'd just like to say this on behalf of the BOAC, that they take really good care of you, not only on the ground, but certainly in the air. The most superb of service on any airline in the world. Fast and a very, very efficient transportation. In no time at all, we were at Montego Bay and also at Kingston. Here is the harbor of Kingston with a beautiful cruise ship and the palm trees swaying in the breeze and the sunset. Just a gorgeous country, exotic. And the first places we visited before we went fishing were the old centers of Port Royal, which was very famous in Captain Morgan's day. You see Horatio Nelson's monument. He used to live here as well. And we talked with various people in Port Royal, which is a suburb of Kingston, now out on a point and around the harbor. We talked to Mr. Dahl here, who is a representative of the Jamaican Tourist Bureau, and we asked him about the chief industries and about what goes on in the old ancient city of Port Royal.
Well, Port Royal, as it's stated now, is naturally a sleeping fishing village, which naturally the most industry in Port Royal is fishing. We are populated 1,532 people in Port Royal, most is children. 75% of that total is children. Well, I'm not an ex-population really, but as you see, it's very, very slow now with the tourists coming to Port Royal, and the season is soon started by next month, which is November, and we're going to have a bright season.
As you see by the great multitudes of children, it's quite a popular area for living. It's a great suburb of Kingston now, and we show you the little chaps and little gals running all over the place. And it was a good start for our tour of Jamaica. Here you see one of the places we stayed. There are a lot of water sports, and it's a great winter paradise for not only swimming, but water skiing, the open deep sea fishing as well. And of course the bathing beauties are in evidence almost everywhere you look. But our main interest, of course, was going fishing on the River Rio Grande, and you're going to meet Mr. Jim Patterson in a few seconds, and he will tell you about it himself. Some of the local people who do their washing right along the rivers and creek banks, and the traditional way of carrying goods on the head of the ladies. Here is a banana plantation. One of the chief exports of the Dominion of Jamaica, of course, is bananas. Another one is bauxite, from which aluminum is made in the smelters at Kitimat and Arvida in our own country here in Canada. But here you see how they harvest the bananas, and even the youngsters getting in the act, and all carrying them mostly by their own backs and on their heads, and bringing them to central points, and where they're shipped from the various centers like Port Antonio, where we visited to go fishing. A very warm and friendly country, Jamaica, and I certainly recommend it to those of you who wish to take a winter holiday. And the people are very, very pleasant. This is firewood for cooking. They use a lot of charcoal as well as firewood, but again, the traditional carrying of the goods and chattels of all descriptions on the ladies' heads. It reminds one of Harry Belafonte's songs. This is the main city of Kingston, the capital, and you see the old and the new meet, with the methods of transportation being employed, the donkey carts and little wagons here, along with modern transportation. With a British heritage, the Dominion of Jamaica naturally favors the British system in many, many ways. The driving is on the left, the money is in pounds, shillings, and pence, and it's like going to a completely different world from North America to Jamaica. And here is the Jamaican Constabulary, the Royal Jamaican Constabulary, which is one of the finest police organizations anywhere in the world. They are trained at Port Royal, where you first visited there and talked to Mr. Dahl. One of the marketplaces in Kingston, again with the old methods of transportation, just as common as automobiles. Almost everyone in Jamaica owns a goat or a herd of goats, and the goats are just running wild all over. Here is the upper reaches of the River Rio Grande, and here you meet Mr. Jim Patterson, the gentleman with the peaked cap on the right of your screen there, a very fine Jamaican who owns a banana plantation himself and is the director of the International Marlin Fishing Tournament held at Port Antonio every fall. And he was a very, very fine chap and looked after our crew very efficiently and showed us all about the fishing in the upper reaches of the Rio Grande. The first way we went fishing was with a fly rod, looking for mountain mullet, which is their sport fish, not unlike our trout. As you will see later on in this episode, we're going to compare mullet fishing with our own trout fishing in Western Canada. Wondering why we stopped the show? Because I want to tell you something important. Over the past year, people from Winnipeg to Victoria have been asking me for a Sportsman filter cigarette. And here is the good news. This is the new king-size Sportsman filter cigarette. You see these two gold leaves? This is your guarantee that they're made from specially selected sun-ripened tobacco. This is vintage tobacco to give you rich, mellow flavor. Just look at this full king-size length of extra tobacco. It's obvious you get so much more than in short, old-fashioned filter cigarettes. Sportsman has always been known as the brand of fine tobacco, and now new Sportsman king-size filter cigarettes are put together by the same people who love tobacco. Join me and get real tobacco taste of the Sportsman king-size filter. Look for the two gold leaves on every pack, our guarantee of quality. This little bridge high in the upper reaches of the Rio Grande, where you see Jimmy casting with a spinning rod, it's beautiful country. It's about a half a day's drive from Port Antonio over mountain roads, much like it is in Western Canada through the Rocky Mountains and through the Coast Range. But the temperature, as you can see by my clothing, is in the high 80s. And even high in the mountains, it very seldom goes down to below about 65 at night. And you can wade in the water with no waders whatsoever and have no fear of getting a chill by any means. And your clothing dries out almost immediately. We didn't find the fishing too successful in our first attempt. Here is an example of a mountain mullet with the two dorsal fins, sort of like a trout, the same general conformation, but a much heavier scaled fish. Some of the ladies again washing their clothes. These are the middle reaches of the river Rio Grande, which is approximately 35 miles long, and there are people living all along its banks in little villages. And we are now at what they call the rafting headquarters, about 10 miles from the mouth. And if you visit Jamaica, this rafting trip is certainly a must. And we're going with Jim Patterson and his raftsman, Reggie, who has taken Jim down the river on many an occasion over the past 25 years. And we're going to be, all of us, enjoying this rafting trip down the river. It's a very safe, shall I say, sport, occupation. It is engaged in by not only the tourists, but many of the residents on Sundays take their wives and their families down this trip. You drive to a certain point in the river, and then you raft down the river, and another car will pick you up at the mouth. The River Rio Grande empties into the Caribbean approximately 5 miles from Port Antonio. We're going to be fishing for mountain mullet, for a hog-nosed mullet, and eventually at the very mouth of the river for the famous snook and tarpon. There's Reggie, one of the most experienced raftsmen on the entire river. In order to become a raftsman, one of the apprenticeships that you must put in is at least 5 years of pulling a raft up the rapids and up the river before you have the right to take a visitor down the current, as these people are doing here. Very, very beautiful, lush growth accompanies the river all the way down its banks. There are some very treacherous rapids, and if you didn't have an experienced raftsman, it would certainly be a problem negotiating them. The rafts are made of bamboo, and the poles the same. And there's a youngster there in swimming on the way down. The river is used as not only a method of transportation, as there are very few roads along it, but also as a washing of clothes type of operation, and they certainly get a lot of their drinking water from it too. That gentleman there with the camera was Mr. Frank McManus of the Tourist Bureau of Jamaica, and we're going to talk now to Jim Patterson about the river, about its fish, about its length, and what to expect along the banks of the Rio Grande.
This river, I would say, is 30 or 35 miles long. It's not very wide, as you can see, possibly 50 or 60 yards at its widest. And there are numerous of these rapids in which we get hog-nosed mullet, which is the pièce de résistance, mountain mullet, drummer, which is a type of bass, and in the lower reaches, snook and tarpon. This particular area is about halfway down the river, and you're more likely to get your mullet fishing in this area than snook. You get small snook here, the larger snook lower in the river.
That was Jimmy Patterson, as I say, one of the finest gentlemen that I've ever had the privilege to meet. And a native Jamaican, his family have lived there for several centuries, and they've operated their banana plantation out of Port Antonio. And that was a little mountain mullet that I'd taken, and the average size of these fish is approximately what you see here, about 10 to 12 inches. The odd large one might approach 15 inches. There's one that's about to spawn. You can tell by the enlarged stomach cavity. Hooking into a larger one here, which I lost. And a real pleasure to fish in shorts and a white t-shirt and a temperature of over 80 degrees. Some of the sights that you see along the riverbank on the rafting trip down. The trip takes approximately half a day. Here is one of the local inhabitants of the riverbank fishing for food. They set out set lines and they catch these mountain mullets and hog-nosed mullets and various other types of both commercial and game fish for their own food. And again, the ladies using the traditional method of transport to carry their washing back up to their homes. This bird is quite common along the riverbank too. It is a vulture, and they won't go after you by any means, but they keep the countryside pretty clean, much as the seagulls do on the west coast of North America, and therefore they are protected and not to be shot. Here comes Reggie down one of the most serious sets of rapids. When there is any danger at all to the visitor, the raftsman will take the raft alone through the worst of the rapids, and the party going down the river, in this case cameraman Bill and Jim Patterson and myself, would walk along the bank. A fabulous trip, and if you're ever going to Jamaica, you must go rafting on the Rio Grande. And if you're lucky enough, as we were, to go fishing as well, it just makes the trip doubly enjoyable. We're wading out into approximately 2.5 feet of water. Jimmy catching another small mullet. We didn't keep any of them. We were just catching them to show the various sizes and the fighting capabilities. They fight much like a grayling, really. More than a trout. They don't jump as often as our western rainbow trout. Here's a fairly nice one I have on here. Would be a good pound in weight. They're a little heavier per size, per square inch, shall I say, than a trout. A little deeper, a little thicker through. And we did have a feed of them at the end of the day down at what they call the Rafters Roost, which is a cabin. And they were very, very delicious. The sun setting on beautiful Montego Bay, actually, in that scene in Jamaica. Now, that is the first of a series of shows and fishing expeditions that you're going to see on Tides and Trails about Jamaica. But now, we'd like to show you, by way of comparison with the rafting in the very hot weather on the beautiful Rio Grande River, we'd like to show you some fishing for grayling, the mountain grayling, the Arctic grayling that is found all along the river drainage systems right here in our own North America, and particularly northern BC, in this case, on the Pack River, a very few miles north of Prince George. Again, you see the little different costume here, but the same general principle. We're going to go down rapids in these long freight canoes that are common all over the North Country, from northern Quebec right through to northern British Columbia. There's Mr. John Barlee, who has recently been appointed manager of our program Tides and Trails, and John is doing a tremendous job, and we show you a picture of him now out in the field with us fly fishing for the Arctic grayling. There are two species of grayling in North America. There's a smaller subspecies of them, and these are found in parts of the United States as well as parts of southern Alberta. But these pictures were taken on Tudia Lake, which is on the John Hart Highway, just a few miles north of the city of Prince George in British Columbia, and going down the Pack Parsnip River system. And again, just by straight comparison with Jamaica, you see the method of locomotion and transport down the rapids. Again, an experienced guide is a must, a very great necessity. In this case, it is Ken Melville, who operates a lodge on Tudia Lake. The fishing is much the same as we were doing in the Rio Grande in Jamaica. Here we're catching the Arctic grayling. Fish, in this case, running anywhere from half a pound to 2.5 pounds. One of the members of the other boat in this particular case caught a darn near record grayling running close to 3 pounds. They will take the dry fly. And that is quite as heavy a fighter, as spectacular a fighter as the rainbow trout. But they're certainly fly fishermen's game fish, and they require considerable skill to entice up to the surface for the dry fly. John having a little bit of trouble here, being caught up in the weeds. Along with the Arctic grayling, you do find the odd rainbow trout. You see this one putting up a spectacular display. Just a little fellow, which we released. And there's the best method of releasing a trout without touching the flesh of the fish at all. But mainly we were interested in the Arctic grayling. And they're the ones, of course, that have the large dorsal fin on the male fish that covers almost its entire back. Very pretty iridescent blues and reds as the fish approach spawning condition. But you see, they don't quite measure up to the trout in fighting ability. They have a small mouth, much like the mullet do in Jamaica, but they have a single large dorsal fin. They have a very heavy set of scales, much thicker scaled than any trout. Of course, if you're going to eat them, you must either fillet them or at least scale the grayling, whereas it's not necessary with a trout. In the half day that we were fishing with Ken Melville, none of us had any problem with our limit of both grayling and trout in the same packed river. And if any of you are considering going to this area to fish, it's a very safe trip once again on these large freight canoes, and the time to go there is roughly the middle of the month of June. Enjoying a sportsman's cigarette while playing a very scrappy grayling. But to get back to the Dominion of Jamaica once again, certainly a worthwhile trip for those of you planning an out-of-Canada holiday, and the time to go there is strictly in the winter time, when most of North America, at least most of our country in Canada, is thoroughly frozen in. There's John with a nice fish. Those of you who wish to get in touch with our main office of Tides and Trails in Vancouver at CHAN TV may now write to John Barlee as our new manager, and I'm sure that he'll be happy to answer your correspondence on various subjects that come up on future shows and related material. Ken Melville releasing about a pound grayling. John catching another one. A wonderful trip. I want to tell you something about cigarettes and what really makes a good cigarette. Sportsman has been known for years as a brand of fine tobacco. Fine tobacco because it's light and golden rich, the best tasting tobacco under the sun. These sun-ripened tobaccos are matured for 3 years to bring them to their full peak of goodness. This is what we call vintage tobacco. Only specially selected tobacco leaves can give real tobacco taste. Now add a filter, and you've got a good cigarette put together by men who love tobacco. But look again. We've made it king size with extra mellow-aged tobacco in every one. This is the new Sportsman king size filter. That's why there's so much more flavor than in old-fashioned short filter cigarettes. Join me. Get real tobacco taste with Sportsman king size filter. Look for the 2 gold leaves on every pack. Our guarantee of quality. Now, by way of comparison, once again, on a river, this time in the west coast of Canada, on Vancouver Island. Going fishing for steelhead and trout, both the char type, the Dolly Varden, and the cutthroat trout, which abound on all the Vancouver Island streams. Going with Dick Harding, Mike Hobbs, Terry Raines, Bob Cave, and various other members of the party. We came across a pool in the Salmon River after walking some good 5 miles that had so many trout in it it was hard to believe. We were looking basically for steelhead using reasonably heavy tackle, but it was a shame in some ways that we did not have our light fly rods here at the time. Using spinning gear and bait as well. But very, very wet conditions. Once again, we see the different types of costume here. It'll keep one dry under these circumstances, and catching trout anywhere from half a pound to 3.5 pounds. I have fished the Vancouver Island streams for many, many years, and this is the most productive pool in the most productive stream I think that I've ever run into, and this was by sheer accident. There were 8 of us in the party, and you were allowed 12 trout per day. And we didn't fill out our limit by any means, but we certainly, each one of us had over half a limit for the day's fishing, and it was well worth the hike into this pool. It's much like anything else. The further you walk and get out of the, shall I say, run-of-the-mill areas, there's the Duke, his lordship, Bob Cave, and the more you get out of the way areas, well, naturally you're going to find the more productive type of fishing. The Dolly Varden of about 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds. In excellent condition. But you can certainly see the wet weather and the comparison here to the beautiful sunshine of Port Antonio in Jamaica. And this is basically winter fishing on the coast of British Columbia, which of course is available not only for the trout that you saw there, but also for the large steelhead, which we've shown you on many a previous occasion. And we're going to take you in the future to many another area in the Dominion of Jamaica. And before we close tonight, I would like to thank once again the very, very wonderful people at the BOAC, the British Overseas Airways Corporation, who have offices throughout the entire world. And if you're planning to go to Jamaica, they'll certainly be happy to make the arrangements for you. They're the finest of service available to you in the air and on the ground, and you get there on time and well relaxed and rested. Just a little example of that, we were sort of caught in a hurry between planes at New York's famous Idlewild Airport. The BOAC was there to meet us with a car, transport us across Idlewild. Those of you who have been there will realize what a madhouse it can be. So we were able to catch the aircraft on time and in good shape. We'd like to thank the BOAC once again. Now, in future editions of Tides and Trails, we'll not only be taking you to Jamaica, but we're going to be taking you back to Great Britain again, and we have all sorts of programs planned for this coming spring and summer out of the country, as well as in our own backyard, all over the provinces of the Dominion of Canada. We're going to go down to the exotic land down under. I know you're going to enjoy some of the trout fishing, particularly in Australia and New Zealand, where the original trout came from British Columbia hatcheries. But that, as we say, is another story, like Rudyard Kipling, and we'll be bringing you those editions in the very, very near future. Once again, thanks to the BOAC for taking us to Jamaica. Be a true sportsman, and remember to smoke Sportsman king-size filter cigarettes. Ted Peck wishing you all the best once again, and tight lines, straight shooting.
Tides and Trails was brought to you by new Sportsman king-size filter cigarettes. Join Ted Peck next week at the same time. Tides and Trails was produced for Sportsman Cigarettes by CHAN-TV, Vancouver.